Welcome to the Average Joe Jiu-Jitsu podcast. This is episode 6. I am sitting down with Josh Settlage this morning. Josh is the BJJ Strength Coach on YouTube and Instagram. Josh, thanks for coming on the show and talking to me this morning.
Thanks for having me, Craig. I know we've been looking forward to this for a while, so I'm glad we get to have a good conversation this morning.
Yeah, we've been talking about this for a while. And it has been. I have been looking forward to it. It should be given. So you're from the Sacramento, Roseville area, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And you seem to have a pretty deep background in wrestling. And you actually coached wrestling at one time?
I did. Yeah. So when I was a kid, I did some traditional martial arts as a kid in elementary school. And then just when the economy crashed, it was just hard to pay for martial arts training, at least for my parents. And we had to budget things elsewhere. But the middle school I went to offered wrestling. And up until that point, I had never really considered wrestling. And I thought, like, foolishly that, wrestling's dumb. You just need, like Kung Fu or something. Not that one is better than the other, but you probably should, value wrestling a lot. And so a friend of mine had come over and he had wrestled. And so we were messing around a little bit, and he so quickly put me in a cradle and pinned me so fast it made my head spin. And I wasn't doing any martial arts training at the time just because it was expensive and parents couldn't afford it at the moment. So talked with my dad, and I wasn't too excited about going to wrestling, but he said, you know what, like, it's through the school, it's affordable, you might as well be doing something. So he took me to that first off-season practice, and I absolutely hated it. And I think I hated it probably for a solid month up until the season started. And then I saw all the other kids come in. So the off season, you're just constantly getting beat up, because if you're there in the off season, the only people that are there are the people that care a lot about getting better at wrestling. And they're probably pretty good. So then once all the other kids came in, and I actually had some like exposure to, like, oh dang, like these moves really work. I was pretty fired up, and I quickly fell in love with it. So I wrestled in middle school, and then wrestled up until my junior year in high school. And that last season of wrestling was really pivotal for me, and I mean, really left a mark on who I am as a person, and kind of pushed me in a direction that took me to where I am today. And so I've been involved in wrestling for a long time, ended up leaving the sport of wrestling. I've been a meathead forever. So throughout all my wrestling career, I've been obsessed with lifting weights and getting jacked and just learning more about how to get strong and be a better athlete. So when I stepped away from wrestling, I dove into bodybuilding, did a bodybuilding show, and thought I was going to compete a lot as a bodybuilder. And then I was like, you know what? I don't know if I want to do that. I think I might want to maybe not go back to wrestling, but try some other grappling sport.
Right.
And jiu-jitsu was just the perfect transition for that. So I got started in jiu-jitsu at Accessory Work Jiu-Jitsu. Actually, I went to another place called Marinobles here in Roseville for a while that offered MMA, kickboxing, jiu-jitsu. And once I kind of figured out, like, I don't really think I'm as interested in the MMA and the kickboxing side of things as I am in jiu-jitsu. Then I transitioned to Accessory Work Jiu-Jitsu here in Sacramento, and that's where I've been ever since.
Awesome. What's your current rank now in BJJ?
Purple belt. I got my purple belt last December.
Nice.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. I it's funny. I wrestled 1 year in high school.
Okay.
I had a really late start in that. And one of my teachers was the coach, and he talked me into it, and I did 1 year. And like you, just the experience was like, this sucks. I'm getting smashed all the time, and but looking back on it now, I was like, oh, I was just being a dumb kid, and I wasn't looking at it the right way. And now after, training jiu-jitsu for 7 years, I'm like, God, I wish I wrestled freaking junior high and all through high school now, But
right.
In hindsight, if you knew what you knew then, you knew now what you knew then, right?
Of course.
And I had the similar experience with bodybuilding, but I did it later in life. I did it in the San Jose when I was 36.
Nice.
And I'm actually, what is it, Sunday? Yeah, I'm turning 50 on Tuesday.
Dang.
So it was quite a while ago. Yeah. And so I did that. I did one time, and it was a cool experience as far as the start and the ending result, but I got blown up by everybody else because I did it naturally, because I was being because I thought I could do a bodybuilding show naturally, right? So I got blown up off the stage, but the ending product of what I looked like before and after was like a personal win, so it was cool.
That's
but
awesome.
I never did it again. I never did.
And so you said that was in San Jose.
Mm-hmm.
So that would have been, was that when they had the Golden State show that they have here in Sacramento? I'm
No,
not
it was
familiar.
the San Jose. It was the San Jose.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And through the NPC.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Yeah. Ronnie Coleman was a guest poser, and
nice.
Tony Peterson. So yeah, it was cool.
Okay.
It was cool being able to actually meet Ronnie Coleman before, all the injuries set in and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you see that? Did you see that that documentary on Netflix?
I've seen most of it in pieces. I haven't sat down and watched it from start to finish, but
it's incredible.
It is incredible, and it's a rough one, man. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of documentaries. I just mostly because I just have a hard time finding some that are really good.
Yeah.
But that one was excellent and really, really well done. And just seeing both sides of it, being able to see what he did on stage, which really like sparked my imagination and really got me involved. And I found a love for lifting through watching Ronnie, through watching Arnold, through watching Dorian Yates, through watching Frank Zane and Sean Ray and all of those guys who were at that kind of like amazing era. And then being able to see the back end of what that cost him. And that was pretty hard to watch for me. Yeah,
it was. I was like, for me, I remember watching his videos. I remember there was a person who went by the name of Mitz. He used to, follow these guys around back in the 90s and do all these videos. And I had a whole like laundry tub full of videos. Like I found a coach who owned a Max Muscle when I was prepping for the San Jose for this contest. And I would do all my cardio watching these videos. And so it just kept me going. It was like inspiration. I knew I'd never look like these guys, but it kept me going. But I remember, and for me, it's always the training is always the thing. It doesn't matter when it was bodybuilding, powerlifting, BJJ, the training is always what drives me. It's like the process is what really interests me. The end product isn't as important to me for some reason. And like, even like watching that stuff, like I was always impressed with Ronnie in the gym more than I was him on the stage, even though he looked like a freak. But, but it was just watching the training process and the weights that he would lift, and like nobody else was doing that. It was just incredible to me. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely amazing.
Where did you when did you coach wrestling? You mentioned that one time in a video.
Yeah. So I wrestled for Roseville High School, and then I graduated and left for a couple of years. And then I ended up coming back to Roseville High School I started as the wrestling strength and conditioning coach. I wasn't too convinced that I was going to do anything with wrestling again at that point, because when I had left wrestling through a long series of events, I ended up hating the sport and hating everything about wrestling. But I was still lifting weights, and I loved lifting weights. I loved being a meathead and doing that side of things. So I came back under the condition that I would just be the strength and conditioning coach. I don't want to be in the wrestling room. I don't want to wrestle with you guys. Like, I'm just going to teach you guys how to lift, and then I'm out. And so the head coach, who was also my head coach, he understood and was fine with that. And then an opportunity popped up for me to be the assistant coach and the head JV coach. And I was in college at the time, and I had just left a job at a gym that I had hated. I thought it would have been awesome working at a gym, and some parts of it were like the free membership was dope, but some other aspects of it, it just really wasn't my style.
Right.
So I was between jobs. I was a broke college student, and I was doing jiujitsu at the time. So I'd already gotten back into some sort of grappling training, and my perspective on wrestling changed to a more positive light. And I said, I need a way to make money coaching. I did not expect it to be as rewarding as it was. It was that first year, really, it challenged me in a lot of great ways, but I think I really found a deep passion for coaching and helping younger athletes. And the biggest thing was just a lot of wrestling athletes, especially in high school, you're at such a pivotal and influential time in your life. You're going from being a freshman wrestler, may go against a senior wrestler at some tournaments, and you look at a 14-year-old boy and an 18-year-old man, and they're not even the same. It's not even the same specimen.
Right.
It's crazy to think that you could be at 14 years old thrown into a match against a grown man sometimes. Right. And that, that mentally, that it does a lot of lot of stuff to you that challenges you and pushes you. And I think if you don't have a mentor that's going to help guide you through those steps, that's been through it and is able to kind of not hold your hand in a negative way, but just walk alongside you and positively encourage you through that, it could be really mentally discouraging as it was for me. So being able to kind of give back to that same program, recognize that some of these young athletes were on the same path that I was, and kind of step in and say like, hey, you know, let's think about this a little bit differently. Let's focus on these things. You know, remember in your off season, like it's not level 10 intensity in your off season that you're going to maintain for the next 4 years. There's ebbs and flows to this. There's going to be times where you do need to go to that dark place in training and figure out how you're going to make it through to the end of practice. And then there are other days where there's a little bit more levity. You can have a little bit more fun and still love and enjoy the sport. So that was a really rewarding experience for me. I'm not a coach there anymore, just because running my own company takes up the majority of my time. So, but I'm still deeply involved with that wrestling community and still keep tabs on all the guys that I coached.
That's excellent. That's excellent. So with a wrestling background, and now with, you know, your new, well, not new, but your current love of BJJ, what do you prefer, Ghee or Nogi?
Oh man, it honestly, you know what? It goes in waves of like 4 to 6 months. There'd be some waves where I'm really like, I know I suck at the Ghee and I need to get better at that. So then I just force myself to, you know, all I'm going to do is lapel guard. All I'm going to do is spider lasso. It's so I freaking hate it, but I know I need to get better. And then after a couple months, I end up really enjoying it. And then all the same people that say like, hey, let's do some Nogi rounds. I'd say like, maybe we can do some more Ghee rounds, you know? But now it's funny that you asked that, because now I'm at the point where maybe like a month ago, we just added a new Nogi class to our training schedule. So I've been going to that class. And now I'm thinking like, I could go without the Ghee for several months and be just fine. So right now I prefer Nogi, but it's like it's a moving target, right, Craig? Like sometimes you have a certain technique that you're kind of chasing, trying to get down. And then once you get that technique down and you're hitting some upper belts with it, then you're like, okay, now maybe it's time to move on to a new technique. You're getting smashed. You can only hit it on some white belts, and that's okay because you're on that path of constant improvement and looking for ways to get better.
Yeah. I mean, personally for me, I just started doing a lot more Nogi. I actually changed academies over the last month. And,
nice.
In my old academy, I was there for 7 years and mainly only did Ghee training because of the schedule. The Nogi was only in the evening, and my day job takes up a lot of my evenings because of meetings. And so very hard for me to get to training at night. And, but I trained, we used to have an 11 o'clock class and the gym was right around the corner from my office. And so I actually trained for the first 7 years, like 5 days a week, every day at 11.
Wow.
Yeah. It was
awesome.
It was awesome. It was nice. I got to purple belt that way. And
that's great.
And then the pandemic hit. And then when the gym opened up again, they were only offering the evening classes, and I just wasn't able to get the training. I was training like one time every week or every couple of weeks or whatever. And it was just lame. After a while, I was like, I really want to train again. So I had to make some hard decisions, and it wasn't an easy decision, but I found another gym closer to my house, and they have really early morning class, but it's mainly a Nogi gym. So now I'm doing a lot more Nogi, and I've actually found that, I mean, I still do Ghee 1 day a week on Saturdays, but I felt like, well, you know, I did Ghee for 7 years. So, you know, I can even myself out now. So that's why I'm really focusing on the Nogi. That's just
awesome. Do you mind if I ask you from your perspective, so you wrestled 1 year in high school, but you almost started jiu-jitsu like with a completely clean slate. Would that be correct to assume?
Well, martial arts with grappling wise, yes. Martial arts wise, no. I did martial arts most of my life. Like I did Shotokan and Shirinji karate for 10 years.
Okay.
I did, I did traditional Japanese jiu-jitsu for 18 years before I did jiu-jitsu. So Brazilian jiu-jitsu. So then I did Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and I've done that for close to 8 years now.
Gotcha. And the Japanese jiu-jitsu, I'm assuming, was Ghee based as well?
It really, in all reality, it's armor based. I mean,
gotcha.
It had, we wore Ghees, but it was all traditional, like Sengoku era, like samurai type martial arts, and a lot of weapons training. And looking back on it, I think there are a lot of cool things I could take from it as far as angling and timing, and, you know, some stuff like the weapons type training was great. I mean, you don't find that in a lot of arts, but beyond that, it was interesting. I went into jiu-jitsu thinking, well, I've got this 4th degree black belt in this traditional Japanese jiu-jitsu. I should do pretty well at this BJJ stuff. It shouldn't be that big of a problem, right? When it got cleaned up by white belt, just smashed.
Oh man.
So it's the same old story that everybody else says. It's the same thing. It's so true. You go in, you have no idea what you're getting into, and these guys just take your lunch money, And so it was an eye opener, and I felt like, number one, it was great for my ego. It really smashed my ego. It made me much more humble. It made me look at the world in a more realistic light. And it also made me realize that if you do martial arts like traditional Japanese jiu-jitsu, which is cool, it's fine, but it is live action role playing. Mm-hmm. And you're missing the live element. Without that live element, you're not really getting the full picture. You're not getting that thing that makes the difference in actually being able to apply it if you had to. Absolutely. So now I feel like as a purple belt in jiu-jitsu, if I had to defend myself and my family with somebody on the street, I could effectively do it. And it would be jiu-jitsu, which would do it. So, it's just that live aspect. It's that aspect of being able to actually go and compete, even like a tournament. You don't know who these people are most of the time. I mean, I've had matches where I've competed against people that I knew that I competed with before, but for the most part, you know who this person is.
Yeah.
Or when you start new gyms, like I've done now, I'm always meeting new people. Or, if you go to an open mat at another gym, you don't know who they are. So it's sort of the same thing where you just, what works for you and what doesn't work. But you have that same mentality of, I don't know how I'm trying to say this, but you have the mentality of just dealing with the problem. It just, those nerves go away as much, and, you can actually apply what you're doing. I guess
yeah.
Is the point, So I don't know if you've had the similar situation or if you feel the same way. I mean,
it was similar in the sense of like, yes, I did get mopped up pretty good the first several months, but because I had a wrestling background, which is all wrist control and collar tie based, the hardest part was learning that there's so many other grips outside of just wrist control, collar ties, underhooks, overhooks, and that sort of thing. So the transition for one of the biggest things I notice, and now that I'm with some of the wrestlers that I used to coach and I'm trying to bring them into the jiu-jitsu fold, is that a lot of the hip movements, a lot of the scrambles translate really, really, really well outside of like leaving your neck and your arms open and getting submitted and things. But from a movement perspective, the scrambles and hip movements translated really well for me, and it has with a lot of my other athletes. But the hardest part was like being in the gi and thinking I could get out of a certain position and then being restricted because someone has a grip on my hip in a way that there's no way they could grab like your belt line in wrestling. There's just nothing to grab there. I mean, there's just not enough skin to even do that. And so kind of unlearning some of those movements where I would explode out of certain positions and trying to like take a step back, like, okay, got to clear these grips, or even pant grips and stuff. That was a whole nother side of things that I was not used to at all. I don't think, I mean, yes, you do grab legs a lot in wrestling as far as takedown goes, but once you're down on the floor, there's hardly anything where you get your legs grabbed unless you're in freestyle and they do a leg lace, but that position is way different than anything you'd find in jiu-jitsu. It's just, it was a big eye opener for me.
Yeah, I feel the same way. It's like, with the gi, it's like sometimes it's like somebody's got ropes on your legs and your arms, and they're just like nailing you to the floor. So, it's different. It is different actually, but that's part of the reason I guess now with the Nogi, I sort of prefer. I like the idea of grappling. Where I heard, I think it was John Danaher who said it. He says with the gi it's jiu-jitsu, without the gi it's grappling. It's sort of different, And I like the idea of learning how to use my hands to submit and so forth, or to base or protect myself, but then use my body to control. And I like the idea of, not having all the material, to deal with. And I do find it, sometimes I find it annoying too with the gi, where people get so wrapped up in the lapel work that it sort of takes, in my opinion, and it's just my opinion, but it sort of takes something that I think is a legitimate martial art and sort of turns it on its head a little bit.
Yeah.
Those aren't things you're gonna be able to do like in a real life situation. And from my personal standpoint, I don't do jiu-jitsu as so much as a sport as I do just as a martial art. I do it for myself. And so, I'm not, yes, I've competed in the past. Yes, I will compete again, but it's not my major focus or major drive for why I do it.
Sure.
And so when I see that type of thing where it's just really like that's really tournament oriented, a competition based Ghee training. I don't find it as interesting, but that's that's one of the point things about the Nogi that I like is that you just don't deal with that. It's just grappling. It's like passing the guard, get to good position, submit.
Yep.
And I really like that, and I like the idea of just it being like mano a mano, and there's none of that material stuff. There's no lapel, no grips. There's it's just grips your hands and so forth, and wrists, like, and ankles, like you said. I like that. So when did you become interested in, well, you said during junior high, you actually started weight training. And did you start weight training in a gym, or did you just start it at home? Or?
I didn't. I started at home. I've only trained at 2 gyms. Well, I take that back. I guess you could say I've trained at some other gyms, but I originally got into strength training because I was at my friend's house. We had like a church pool party, I guess. Mm-hmm. And we were at our friend's house, and my dad was talking to another dad, and this other dad, his son was a little bit older than me. And I looked up to him. He was like the cool guy everyone wanted to be. And I overheard him and my dad talking, and he said, like, yeah, my son Logan, he's been doing push-ups and sit-ups every day. He's like trying to get in shape and stuff. And so I was like, well, if it's good enough for Logan, it's good enough for me. Mm-hmm. So I just did the same thing. And the first workout I ever did was 50 push-ups and 100 sit-ups. And then I kept repeating that. And up until that point, I had seen my dad lift weights in the garage, and he had the old Sears concrete weight set with the most the most atrocious barbell you've ever seen. Mm-hmm. We had the old loadable dumbbells, which he still has at my parents' house right now. Mm-hmm. And so he just slowly kind of like encouraged me to continue learning about it. And my mom had 3 brothers who were on the wrestling team. And at that time they had a power team in high school. So they were all into lifting weights. And so I was able to learn from them a couple of things. And right at that time it was kind of around the time where YouTube, it was the very early stages of YouTube. So you could find some stuff about bodybuilding, could find some stuff about strength training. And it was all the greatest highlight videos of all time. It's the clips of Pumping Iron with Arnold and all those guys training. It was those Ronnie Coleman clips. I remember showing my friend one time, I was telling him, like, bro, like, check this out. Like, isn't this so sick? Like, these dudes are working out. And I remember him seeing a picture of, or not a picture, but the video of Ronnie Coleman doing the famous deadlifts, the Yeah Buddy deadlifts.
Yeah.
And he's like, dude, I would never want to look like that. And in my head, like, I didn't recognize that was like a common perspective on the sport of bodybuilding. But in my head, I thought, like, you don't, like, this dude looks like all the comic books we've ever read. Like, why wouldn't you want to look like this?
Right.
So that's originally how it started. And then when I wrestled, once I got into high school, one of my wrestling coaches was a police officer. And at the police station, at the time, CrossFit was really popping off, and a lot of law enforcement and first responders were doing CrossFit. So at the police station that he worked at, they had this side building that housed their community gym. Mm-hmm. And so it was for the police officers, but on certain days they'd open it up to the community. So the wrestling team would go in there a couple of days a week and do these CrossFit workouts. And so I got really, really invested in CrossFit because it was very competitive. It was very high paced and very stimulating, which for me at the time, I think was a big blessing to have something that kept my attention like that and was able to keep me focused and driven towards something. And not only was it just like exciting and stimulating, but I saw some immediate results with how I compared myself to some of my other teammates. I noticed that, like, I'm continuing to do this and I'm starting to run faster than everybody. I'm starting to be stronger than everybody. I'm starting to do more pull-ups than everybody. And I'm starting to build more muscle than everybody. Right. And that was really encouraging. And that was almost an extreme confirmation bias that I just took all the way through and did one CrossFit competition in high school. And I trained there, and at another gym, that was another gym in town, another CrossFit gym. I trained there between that spot or those spots and in my garage all the way throughout high school. And it wasn't until my senior year in high school that I got a job at a commercial gym and finally, like, started training with machines and started to learn, like, okay, like, hammer strength. What is that? When people say hammer strength row, what does that even mean? I finally figured out what that meant. I finally figured out what rope curls were. And that was really fun because not that I had left bodybuilding at all. All I had was dumbbells, barbells, and a pull-up bar at home.
Right.
So I did a lot of CrossFit workouts, and then my bodybuilding exercises were just mainly limited to dumbbells. So getting the chance to experience like what it really was like to do exercises on machines and cable machines and use them in a way, like, of course, like, I don't know if the CrossFit community still thinks this way, if they think bicep curls are stupid, but bicep curls for me were freaking awesome. Like I love curls. They were fun, and I had a great time with it. And so once I got to that gym, I saw real bodybuilders. And that was right at the time when I was leaving the sport of wrestling. I hated wrestling, wanted nothing to do with it. And not that I was going to stop training because I didn't have a need to. I was just looking for something to train for. Like, I know I wanted to get jacked. I know I wanted to get stronger, but like just to do it at the time didn't sit well with me. So I was looking for a competitive avenue. I wasn't really interested in doing Olympic weightlifting. Powerlifting, I enjoyed, but that was like right at the start when guys like Dan Green were coming in, when Mark Bell was getting shredded. So I hadn't really seen what a jacked powerlifter looked like. I only saw what Mark Bell at 330 pounds looked like. I only saw what fat powerlifting was like. So I wasn't really down with that. But I was hanging out with these bodybuilders at the gym, and they kept telling me like, hey man, like you should do a show. You should do a show. And so I said, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Maybe I'll do it. So they ended up twisting my arm enough. I ended up signing up for one. I didn't train with them, but working there, I saw them all the time, and I'd work out, after my shift or before my shift started. And I trained at that gym for a long time. But the job freaking sucked. I hated the job. The gym culture, like, had a really small pocket of guys that lifted intensely, and that reminded me of the intensity that I looked up to in those Ronnie Coleman and Arnold videos. But it was so hard to like train with them because, when they come in, I'm working. The only time I see them is when I was at the front desk. So then I ended up leaving that job and was lifting in my garage by myself for a little bit. And that was really, really impactful for me because I was able to train at the intensity that I wanted to train, but no one was holding me accountable to train at that intensity. So I really had to put myself in check and like dial in my own level of discipline to train that way consistently. And then since I was in college at that time, I go from one gym that's like, for lack of a better term, like vanilla and really lukewarm. And then I start my internship at Super Training Gym, which is, in my opinion, one of the greatest gyms that's ever popped up on the West Coast of all time. It's amazing. So that transition, like, I got thrown into the deep end so freaking fast. And I freaking love it at Super Training now. I still train there to this day.
I would actually love to go train there sometime. It's in Sacramento. It's not that far from here, but Saturdays are free still.
Yeah. Saturday. So Super Training Gym, now that the pandemic is over, open gyms back. It's open gym every Saturday, Sunday from 9 a.m. to 1. I would keep up with the Instagram page though, because I think we're going to start doing seminars more frequently.
Cool.
And if that's the case, then the open gym hours are going to shift a little bit.
Oh yeah, that gym is it's legit. It's legit. I mean, I don't like gyms. The majority of gyms, like, they used to have some really nice gyms in this area, in the San Jose area. Like, when I was, initially getting into it when I was 17 and 18, and my initial shot at bodybuilding and all that, we had the Gold's Gym downtown. We had the Ironworks here in Campbell, and the Ironworks World Gym was, was run by Scott Wilson. It was owned by Scott Wilson, and it was an awesome gym. It was like geared toward. This was probably this was in the late 80s, early 90s, and so it was geared toward bodybuilding and powerlifting. They actually had a room for powerlifters. And
that's great.
I can't remember Mark's last name, unfortunately, but there was another gentleman named Mark who was a competitive powerlifter. He wrote for ESPN and all these things, and he was a pretty intense guy, but he was strong. I think he's still around the area doing something. But yeah, there were a lot of cool gyms when I was growing up, but now they're all gone. And it's like, I live 2 blocks from American Barbell, which used to be Golds and Campbell. And I don't go over there. I just train at home. I just said, I'm done with gyms. I don't want to, be in all these environments anymore. I'd rather just work out at home. and do my own thing. And that's what I do now. I just have a, bunch of stuff in my garage, and I can throw chalk around and bang stuff
There you
around
go.
and have it all dirty and don't care, and,
Yes,
what I
sir.
want. So that's my thing. I know that's just sort of my personal thing. I just don't like
Yeah.
the gym environment, and I've never done CrossFit. I have, of course, been aware of CrossFit for years, never done it. It seems cool, but there's also, it's a very, culture driven endeavor, and
Yeah.
very expensive. And, it's like either do CrossFit or do Jiu-Jitsu. Can't do both, It's just,
Yeah, that's for sure.
you know.
I would encourage you, and we can continue this conversation over the next several months, but there are some great strength thinking. You could say they're like, okay, this is a CrossFit coach, but watching from my perspective, what they do, what it is it's just real strength and conditioning, but they position it in a way that takes these movements that CrossFit made famous and structures them in a way that doesn't seem just random. Like, and that's what drove me freaking nuts about CrossFit is like, does anyone understand like that this stuff can't be random all the time? Like, okay, some stuff can like catch you by surprise in competition, kind of like similar to strongman to a certain extent. They do have a little bit of prep time. So that aspect of watching competition is fun. But does anyone understand that you literally cannot walk in and take all these different people? The youngest person is 16 years old and loves this stuff and is trying to compete. And the oldest person is 60.
Right.
And you're going to make us do the same workout.
Right.
Like that doesn't seem,
no, that doesn't make sense. Yeah.
But that being said, from CrossFit, I think there have been some great strength, like just really solid strength and conditioning coaches that have emerged from CrossFit that kind of see the forest from the trees and can pull all the great things about CrossFit from a conditioning perspective and blend them in a way with the strength side of things and even the aesthetic side of things from bodybuilding that makes it, they complement each other well.
That's cool. Yeah, I would love to do that. Yeah, if you want to keep, sharing those things with me and we could keep talking about them even offline, it'd be great.
Sure.
Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, it's like, that's the thing about training. It's like I currently primarily do the conjugate, which is something you really like as well. And it's part of the reason why we're having this conversation today, right? And part of what we're going to talk about. But also, I think it's like you were saying about different age things. It's like what's important to me may not be what's important to you. As far as I'm almost 50, maybe I need to start really working more on hypertrophy and keep my muscle mass up because I'm getting older and I don't want to freaking lose it, right?
Yeah.
So, so that might be something I'll do more jacked and tan work than doing more, max effort work. I still think max effort work is good, but like you said before too, there's different ways to do max effort work. It doesn't have to be 1 rep max. It could be a 3 rep, 5 rep. It could be an AM rep, all those different things. So that's what I'm sort of looking at. Is one thing I want to talk to you about the conjugate today. And I wanted to, bounce some ideas off of you as far as different ways to do it for maybe an olderish athlete who also has something like jujitsu, where you're not spending a ton of time in the gym every week because you can't do, you can't serve two masters, right?
100%.
Like during the pandemic, I was doing conjugate, max effort, like 1 reppers all year, doing that. And I got some of my weights back up to some old standards that I had done for a while. Yeah, it was awesome. And I actually put about 5 to 7 pounds on, probably mostly muscle, some fat, but as soon as I went back to jiu-jitsu, what I feared was going to happen happened, and my strength levels plummeted back down because I just didn't have the recovery ability to do that many workouts a week at that intensity, plus do jiu-jitsu. And it was just too much. My body it's so hard. But that's the thing about jiu-jitsu and weightlifting that has been the biggest challenge for me for the last 7 to 8 years, is trying to get enough intensity in my workouts to make gains at it while still able to train jiu-jitsu.
Interesting.
So, it's just the whole recovery factor. When you're older, you have a high pressure job, you've got a family to take care of, it's just real life. And so that's some of the things I want to talk to you about today. So as I say, you're a big proponent of the conjugate system. And for people who don't know what the conjugate system is, it's basically a Bulgarian Russian-based training method that comprises of the max effort method, the submaximal effort method, the dynamic effort method, and repetition method in a nutshell. It's an easy, digestible way to explain it. And so you have come up with a 3-day split that you like to use for jiu-jitsu. Can you explain that split?
Yeah, absolutely. So for the listeners, the traditional conjugate method as it was developed for powerlifting. I'm unfamiliar with what their split was in Russia for Olympic weightlifting, but at least when I first heard of the conjugate system from Louis Simmons, the way it was structured was you have 4 primary training days. You go really, really heavy for the lower body on one day, really, really heavy for the upper body on another day. Those are your first 2 days. And then your second 2 days would be really, really fast for the lower body and really, really fast for the upper body. And that's kind of like the general 4-day split: heavy, heavy, fast, fast. Sure, you could mix those things around, but that was kind of the base template. And so I did that same template for a long time, and it worked pretty well. I mean, it was fun. I was in college, and I had a great time doing it. And I don't think that I think even a 4-day split is great for jiu-jitsu athletes. But the thing was, when I left college and I had more time to go to jiu-jitsu, I just couldn't recover in time. And so I played around with a lot of different things of like, okay, realistically, I mean, I can train as many days as I want, but I'm going to feel like crap for a lot of those days. And that's not conducive to making positive progress. So what I did was I talked to a lot of different people. One person I talked to was Phil DeVroux, who's one of the greatest strength and conditioning coaches for martial arts athletes that I think the world has ever seen. He's actually Dustin Poirier's strength and conditioning coach. And he has a 2-day conjugate split. And the reasoning behind that was because, at least what he was telling me, is that there's just not enough time. It'd be great if these MMA athletes could come in 3 days a week and they can spread out the workload, but they have their sessions with Phil, but then they also have their striking, their grappling, their skills training. They have their MMA sparring sessions. They have their recovery sessions. They have so much stuff going on. It's just not realistic to ask for them to give you 3 days a week or 3 or 4 days a week of training, even if you'd like to. So I saw how he combined certain aspects, taking the 4-day conjugate split down to 2 days. And I'm a meathead. I love training in the gym, and I'm not an MMA athlete. So I was thinking like, well, I want to be in the gym more than 2 days. I enjoy being in the gym. So what could I do to kind of spread that out, but not make it the traditional 4 days? Because that's where I was having a little bit of issues. And so I played around with a lot of different things, and I made a lot of mistakes along the way. Some of the mistakes I did was trying to keep the same template of volume and keep the same amount of intensity, but then cram the dynamic effort days into 1 day at the end. And those days, like, even though they were fun because you're in the gym for 3 or 4 hours, you're in the gym for 3 or 4 hours, and that's not very maintainable.
Yeah.
You probably understand this a lot more than I do. As soon as you have a wife and kids and a family, you have to be responsible for it and take care of and provide for. Spending 3 or 4 hours in the gym, it may not be always the best use of your time for those things. And so I was starting to experience some of that as well.
Yeah.
So I played around with a lot of different things, and kind of what I've been running for myself. I've been doing this for, I think, 2 years using this format, and I've been using it with my athletes for about a year. And we've seen some just unfreaking real results. Is you still have true max effort days. So your first day is going to be max effort lower. Your second day is going to be max effort upper. So that takes care of that aspect. Sure. But instead of going to your accessory work or using the repetition method for those respective body parts, you're just going to do the dynamic effort work for the opposite. So day 1 is going to be really heavy for the lower body, really fast for the upper body. Sure. Day 2 is going to be really, really heavy for the upper body and really, really fast for the lower body. And I guess I should also mention, if someone goes online and looks up conjugate method and they look at Louis Simmons or Westside Barbell's traditional 4-day split, or you look at any of the other conjugate content out there from Elite FTS and Dave Tate or even Mark Bell, it's going to be really hard to take the same powerlifting focused conjugate model and the amount of volume that they're doing, combine it into 2 days, and then assume it's going to work for jiu-jitsu, because there's a lot of nuances in there that have to work well for jiu-jitsu and wrestling that don't necessarily translate from powerlifting to those sports. But we can get into that a little bit later. So the first 2 days are your max effort and dynamic effort days. We do one exercise for our max effort lift for the lower and upper body, and then we follow that up with some sort of secondary exercise. Because we're training for sport, a lot of times I like to do some sort of unilateral or single arm or single leg work as that secondary exercise. Not all the time, depends on what training phase we're in. So for example, we may work up to a really heavy set of 3 on Zertra box squats. And then our secondary exercise on day 1 is going to be a Zertra split squat. We'll do that. And then we're going to move into our dynamic effort work for the upper body. That could be floor press against chains. That could be bench press against bands. And then I also like to mix in some medicine ball throws and plyometrics on the dynamic effort sections of training. So that could be bench press and a medicine ball throw. That could be speed squats or speed deadlifts with some sort of box jump or some sort of hurdle jump. Those will be the first 2 days, really, really heavy and really, really fast. And then the third day, which some weeks is my favorite, because all that is just accessory work. And for those listening, if you're unfamiliar with what accessory work is, when it comes to the conjugate method, basically you're just getting jacked. So about all the fun stuff. So we're doing our shoulder presses, we're doing our curls, we're doing our tricep push downs, we're doing our seated rows. Like we have so much fun on day 3. And you could look at, even though we call it our jacked and tan day, really what it is it's full body accessories. And from my perspective, the way I like to program day 3 is to have a nice mix of having some fun stuff in there, but also having some active, not necessarily active recovery stuff, but more so like exercises that are going to make you bulletproof. So a lot of sled drags. You're probably not going to get shredded glutes doing sled drags, but you think about how it's going to build your posterior chain, how it's going to help build up the connective tissue in your low back, hips, and your knees. It's really going to help you decrease your risk of injury overall. So we try to have a nice balance of the fun stuff and the necessary stuff. And that is day 3. So we train 3 days a week. First day is max effort lower, dynamic effort upper. Day 2 is max effort upper, dynamic effort lower. And then day 3 is jacked and tan or just accessory work.
Perfect. That cleared it up for me, because I was like, when's he doing the accessories? Because I was like, okay, it's 3 days, but I've only seen 2 days on the videos. And I was like, okay, how does that work? No, that's actually pretty cool. I think I'm going to use that.
Thank you.
I like it. I'm going to use it, because I was like, how am I going to do this? Because I got to find a way to do it. The minimum amount of days I can do it, but still like get an effect. And I have all that equipment in my house, my garage, the sled, everything.
Awesome. Yeah. Oh, that's great. I guess I should also mention that the recovery time between those sessions is also very important. We used to do this where we'd go days 1 and 2 back to back, and then take a day off and then do day 3. And that was a train wreck. We only did that for like a couple weeks, because that was freaking rough. So the way we structure it out is we have at least a full day of no lifting between those days. We train usually Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, or Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And that's when we'll do those days for the conjugate split.
Okay. So actually, it was a question I was going to ask you too. It's like, I don't remember his name off the top of my head. I think his name's Josh, but I don't think so. Can't remember exactly, but he's the guy who does jargonet.
Oh, Chad West.
Yeah, that's his name, Chad.
Yeah,
he's just BJJ now. He used to be a big time powerlifter, right?
Yeah.
But he was saying how he schedules his lifting days is on his hard jiu-jitsu days. So he does the jiu-jitsu in the morning, and then he does the lifting in the evening. And that way he's getting more recovery days during the week, because he's not doing BJJ hard one day, the next day he's lifting hard, the next day he's doing BJJ again. So have you ever experimented with that, or have you tried that?
I have. I think that's a great way of going about it. And I encourage a lot of my athletes to do that. First, I think ideally that would be awesome. To be able to I'm going to lift really heavy today, and I'm going to do all my hard sessions at jiu-jitsu later in the afternoon. And then tomorrow when I go to jiu-jitsu, I'm just going to keep it chill and I'm just going to drill. But we've all been there. We all know how that goes sometimes. Like, hey, bro, I'm just going to flow roll today. And you really got to have a lot of discipline to keep yourself at that, sub-maximal effort in jiu-jitsu. So one thing that I've done to help kind of aid my athletes in being able to manage that is, especially when it comes to competition, is figuring out okay, what days do you want to go hard? Let's model all of our strength training sessions after the days that you feel like your best training partners are there. Because if you're planning on rolling hard on Monday and you just did some heavy freaking squats and we're throwing bars across the room on your dynamic effort bench work, but then you show up to training expecting you're going to train hard and your best training partner isn't there, but he shows up on Tuesday. Well, then now you got to roll hard on Tuesday. and then you got to go back into another hard training session the day after. So
Right.
there is a little bit of a balancing act with that, figuring out, okay, what days are we going to roll hard? What days are we going to lift hard, and kind of mesh those together. But ideally, if you can keep your hardest lifting days and your hardest jujitsu days within the same 24 hours, I think that's a great approach.
Yeah. What I'm trying to do is I actually do jujitsu at 6:30 a.m. So
Nice.
yeah, so I do jujitsu in the morning, and then I try to get my lifting in the late afternoon, early evening.
Okay.
So
Awesome.
that's what I try to do. So I'm experimenting with it. I'll let you know just offline if you care, just for your own knowledge. I'll let you know how it goes after a couple of months. I'm going to do it for like 3 months to see how it goes.
Awesome. Yeah, I'd love to hear it.
So I'm trying to track my numbers to see, starting out now, where I actually feel like I'm pretty weak right now. Like I said, my numbers just went down when I started training jiu-jitsu again really hard. My weightlifting numbers went down. But I'm going to see how it goes and see if they come back up. So there was something else that you said. Oh, yes. So we were talking about the max effort upper and lower and the type of exercises, and the primary exercise and the secondary. So you mentioned one time on one of your YouTube videos, you have this top 5 barbell exercises for BJJ and grapplers. And I know what they are, but I'm wondering if you wanted to explain some of those. And some key points.
Yeah, for sure. So these top 5 / my favorite, I get comments on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube all the time. Well, what about this lift? It's like, I did not even say that lift sucks. I'm just saying that these are my favorite, dude. So for listeners at home, I understand that there are a lot more exercises to do than these 5, but these are like my favorite and some that I found have worked best for the athletes I'm working with every week. First one is going to be the Zertra Squat. And I would also throw the Zertra box squat in there as its own variation. Just, the Zertra squat as its Zertra and box squat as one. And yes, the back squat is great. Yes, the front squat is awesome. But as jiu-jitsu athletes and wrestling athletes, we all know what it's like to have some banged up shoulders. And if you aren't able to train at a gym like Super Training Gym, where you have access to literally every bar you can think of, if you're going to a standard gym, all you have is a straight bar. And sometimes if you're drilling Kimuras and your elbow or your shoulder is getting pretty banged up, you're not going to be doing yourself many favors if you're cramming your shoulders and elbows back underneath a straight bar. So using a squat movement and being able to hold the bar in the Zertra position, which basically means you're just holding it within the crooks of your elbows. That's going to do a couple of things for you. It's going to take some strain off your shoulders, and it's going to allow you some more time to lift heavy while also focusing on your shoulder mobility. But then the biggest thing that I think that the Zertra squat does for a lot of grapplers is it's going to really help your upper back get strong, especially when it comes to building isometric strength, not allowing your posture to get broken down. The reason why anybody loses a position on the mat, whether it's wrestling or jiu-jitsu, is because one of 3 things gets taken away, or 2 of these 3 things get taken away from them. You have your posture, you have your structure, and you have your base. If you're playing guard, you're going to get your guard passed, or you're going to be stuck there for a while. If you can't break your opponent's posture down, you can't get rid of some of the structures that they've set up to hold themselves up. And if you can't disrupt their base, posture being a big one, making sure that your upper back, your neck, even your low back is super, super strong isometrically so that you can hold position and have strong posture is very important. So the Zertra squat is a great exercise, which is not only going to help develop your posterior chain, being your low back, glutes, and your hamstrings, but it's a squat variation that also forces you to keep your chest up and your upper back tight, which is going to translate very well to jiu-jitsu. The second exercise that I like to use is the floor press. Now, I get a lot of heat about this one because people say, like, if you do that in a match, I'm breaking your arm. It's like, well, I hope you would, because then I'm making some giant mistakes. And it's just really important to recognize that, look, just because we do a certain exercise in the gym doesn't mean that that's proper jiu-jitsu technique. You don't see me wrapping cable machines around my legs trying to do worm guard, and you don't see me trying to bench press people off my chest in jiu-jitsu, just because those things are unrelated as from a technique standpoint. So with that out of the way, the floor press is awesome, in my opinion, just because it's like a box squat for the upper body. The box squat is great because you sit down to a box, and it's great for a few reasons. You have a fixed range of motion. A lot of times with new lifters or new athletes, they have a hard time getting down to what they think they're hitting depth, when really, when you look at it, it's like, you're not even close, bro. So same thing with bringing the bar all the way down to a stopping point. You're able to bring it all the way down to the floor. And when you bring it down to the floor, it actually separates the lowering phase and the upward phase of the lift. So it separates the eccentric and the concentric components of the lift, which means you have to bring all that weight down, but then you have to press from a dead stop. And not that, you want to be slamming your elbows on the ground to bounce off your triceps. You're not really able to do that. That really hurts your wrists. But you have to have an insane amount of control to stabilize that position at the bottom. And then from a dead stop, be able to press the bar back through to lockout. And then the third benefit I found with the floor press is that because, again, the shoulders are one of the most common injury sites for grapplers, the floor press allows you to still lift heavy in a horizontal pressing movement without necessarily putting all that strain on your shoulders. If you have a slingshot, I think a slingshot bench press is another excellent movement for grapplers. Yes. Oh, awesome. Perfect. So the slingshot bench press is another excellent movement for grapplers. And I do think grapplers should bench press once they learn how to do it effectively, once they have the adequate shoulder mobility to be able to do that. But just starting out, start with the floor press and then work your way up to the bench press. The third exercise is going to be the deadlift. I'd throw any variation of deadlift in there. Trap bar, conventional, sumo, block pulls, deficit deadlifts, any sort of heavy hip hinging movement. I think you should be doing all sorts of variations of those. And the biggest reason being great for grip strength, great for upper back strength. Conventional deadlift is going to be awesome for strengthening your hamstrings, your glutes, and just having a strong low back. They say deadlifts are bad for your low back, but it's only if you're doing them incorrectly. And not everyone says like, well, they told me that, deadlifts are bad for my back. I literally have this conversation at Jiujitsu, at least like once every other week. And I'm thinking like, who's they? I've never said that. So don't throw me in there.
Any exercise is bad if you do it wrong.
Oh, 100%, 100%.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, absolutely. So the deadlift is a great one. Great builder for the posterior chain. It's an awesome test of raw strength. If your deadlift is seeing improvement, that's just a surefire way that you're getting sstronger. And then another thing that's great is that it starts from a dead stop. If you're doing it correctly, if you're bouncing plates off the rubber mats, we want to avoid that as much as possible. But being able to generate force off the floor and being able to pull a weight up through to lockout is an awesome test of strength. And it's a great way to continue getting stronger. You get a lot of other areas of your body really strong. Your core is going to get stronger. Your grip's going to get stronger. Traps will get stronger, all that good stuff. Right. Number 4 is another pressing exercise called the Z press. And the Z press is great because you cannot cheat this exercise at all. If you try to cheat it, you're just going to fall over and then you end up missing the lift and you recognize like, okay, I got to go back and fix some things. But the Z press is basically a shoulder press with you sitting on your butt. So a lot of times you see people do shoulder press, whether it's with dumbbells or a barbell. They do it when they're standing or sitting on a bench or in some sort of like military press rack at the gym. And what that allows you to do is when you're able to stabilize your hips and have your legs out in front and your feet on the floor, you can lock in your lower body to have a stable base, which means you can arch your back a little bit so that you can put your shoulders and elbows in a better pressing position. And you can hide a lot of your mobility restrictions doing it that way. I don't think that's a bad exercise, but that exercise doesn't tell the full story when it comes to overhead mobility and shoulder mobility. Right. And we've been talking a lot about the shoulders, but the shoulders are one of the most common injury sites in wrestling and jiu-jitsu. And I'd argue that it's probably the same for sambo, judo, and a lot of other high intensity grappling sports. Absolutely. So using the Z press, where you're sitting on your butt, legs out in front, you are unable to arch your back in a way that's going to allow you to press overhead, because if you do, you're going to end up falling backwards. And so not only are you getting a really strong upper back by being able to stabilize that position and press overhead, you're able to identify any mobility restrictions that you have, but you're also able to get a really, really, really strong core and trunk, because you have to keep yourself forward in a way that makes sure that your spine is upright. And in jiu-jitsu, having a strong core is super important. And then the fifth and final one is just, it's just awesome. It's fun. It's great for getting strong, but it's also great for hypertrophy work and building more muscle. And that's going to be the bent over row. Yeah. I would throw almost any bent over row variation in there. So that could be the pendlay row. That could be, for lack of a better term, like a cheating row, where you're almost deadlifting it to gain some momentum and then rowing it into your body. If you can do those things with proper form and technique and are properly placing them in your workouts in the right way so you can continue making progress, I think any bent over row variation is going to be really beneficial for a lot of grapplers. And the main reason being is because not only do we have to push and press a lot of things away from us, established frames, but we also need to pull a lot of things into us. So if you get stronger in your bent over row, your guard passing is going to be a lot tighter. Sucking someone's legs in for a takedown is going to be a lot more effective, so on and so forth. Those would be the 5: Zertra squat, floor press, deadlift, Z press, and the bent over row.
Nice. Yeah. The one that I really need to work on is the Z press, because my shoulder mobility is crap. And so I tried it a couple months ago and I was like, oh man, this is brutal. But
did you try it with a barbell right away, or did you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
One thing that I found, and you may find this helpful too, is if someone can't get into the position or find success with it with a straight bar, having them start out with just one dumbbell at a time. That way they could use their other hand to help balance, to keep them forward without going into a straight bar and falling backwards. So I'll even throw that into some of my athletes' warm-ups, having them start out like, okay, your main movement is the barbell Z press, but we're going to warm up with single arm dumbbell Z press for a few light sets. And then we'll work into the barbell.
Okay. That makes sense. I'm going to try that. I am going to try that. Huh. I never thought about that. Yeah. You can use a dumbbell and hold on to I'm going to try it. I'll let you know how it goes.
Yeah, for sure, man. Let me know.
Yeah. And I tried your video on mobility work, and hold on, let me let the dog out of this room.
No worries. You're good.
Sorry. I tried your video on mobility work the other day, and there was a nice, interesting thing you did with the lacrosse ball. You stuck it on the floor underneath, behind the rotator cuff of the scapula, and basically painted the ceiling like you were doing a Kimura or a Americana.
Awesome.
Yeah, I've got to do that. And the one, over the head, I don't know, what do you call this one?
The pass-throughs?
Yeah, pass-throughs. Yeah. So those might help. But I think I really want to concentrate on the shoulder mobility and see if I can actually get the barbell Z press moving and go from there, because that's obviously a weak point in my body. You touched on something else about. I did like the idea of how you described the benefits of the bent over row for jiu-jitsu, as far as like the crushing the legs and the pulling in and so forth. And I was visualizing that, and it made a lot of sense. I was like, wow, that does make a lot of sense. I need to do more bent over rows. How do you feel about doing pulling movements as a max effort exercise?
I think they're awesome. I've done them before, and I think it's important to differentiate, especially when we're talking about max effort work. If you look at max effort work from a powerlifting perspective, a lot of times max effort work means working up to a 1 rep max. And in the true conjugate system, at least though, for powerlifting, the way Louis Simmons designed it, the goal of max effort work was to strain against really, really heavy weights. If you keep those two things in mind and apply those to pulling movements, I think there can be some success in that, but you have to be really careful on which pulling movements you choose and make sure that the athlete's form is absolutely perfect. Because a lot of times people pull with their biceps, and if you jump into 1 rep max, super heavy rows, you do run the risk of having some bicep tendonitis flare up, or even worse, tearing a bicep, depending on the max effort exercise. So I think max effort pulling movements should also be treated the same way as max effort good mornings. Working up a 1 rep max good morning probably isn't the best idea, but doing heavy sets of triples, heavy sets of 5 or heavy sets of 6, I think that's awesome. Okay. I think the volume, when it comes to working up to max effort work for pulling movements, I think you got to be a little bit careful with that. I'm not sure how much benefit, because oftentimes the amount of weight that you could use to load up the nervous system on a pulling movement is just so much less than a pressing movement. Right. I would suggest maybe adding a few more sets, or just taking a lot longer in your warm-ups to have a little bit of a better response from those max effort pulling movements. So a max effort bent over row for a set of 5, where you work up to a heavy set of 5, but instead of going plate, quarter up until that heavy set, maybe go 10-pound jumps all the way up to that heaviest set. I do think a lot of times, like what I've done and have had a lot of success with this, is not using pulling movements for a max effort exercise, so to speak, or like a tester lift, but using them as a secondary exercise following the max effort pressing movement. So say we do a max effort floor press, we throw some chains on there, we work up to a heavy set of 3. Now we're going to do 4 heavy sets of 6 on weighted pull-ups. So it is still heavy. It is still, we are still putting maximum intent and effort into the pull-ups, but we're not necessarily working up to a maximum lift for a certain amount of reps. We're able to get in a little bit more volume because the weight is lighter. We're not getting the same sort of stimulus that we'd get as far as our nervous system is concerned, but we kind of already took care of that with the max effort floor press against some heavy chains.
That makes a lot of sense. That's a good explanation. Thank you. That's really
of course.
So what about, you and I touched on this a little bit in our text messages, dynamic effort.
Yeah.
So I have tried dynamic effort off and on for years. And when I power lifted, I felt some benefit because when I power lifted, I was 240 pounds and I could actually move some okay weight, especially with like a suit on or something.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm not nearly as strong as I was back then. And sometimes I feel like when I do dynamic effort, especially at 50, 55 or 60% of my 1 rep max, it's like, it's hardly anything. Am I really going to get benefit out of that? Is that enough to really stimulate the body, or is it, or do you feel like there's a point where a weaker athlete doesn't get as much out of dynamic effort work?
Yes. Yeah. So if we look at dynamic effort work only from the sense of like, okay, the goal is to only get faster. Mm-hmm. A brand new athlete, someone that's really green, or even someone that's a little bit older and they don't have the same strength that they had before, looking at the given percentages that we can find online, which sometimes that's even hard too. Like who has the right percentages on dynamic effort work, which I've learned is just for athletes, base it less off of percentages and focus more on bar speed. If the bar is moving fast across all 8 sets, across all 10 sets, or even upwards of 20 sets, if you work up to that, if bar speed is looking good, you're probably okay. But what's also great about dynamic effort work, there's several benefits that you get from it, whether you're an advanced athlete or you're a beginner athlete. You get in a lot of volume and a lot of first repetitions. So doing 10 sets of 3 is very different than doing 3 sets of 10. If you do 3 sets of 10, you really only get 3 first reps. Right. If you do 10 sets of 3, you get 10 first reps. And what's important about those 10 first reps is that you get 10 opportunities to set up perfectly on the bench press or set up perfectly underneath the bar. And for newer athletes, that's really important. For guys like you and me, Craig, we've been in the game for a long time. You've been in the game much longer than I have. So your form and technique is pretty dialed in unless it's a brand new exercise that you're learning how to figure out. But for a newer athlete that's in high school, yeah, we may not be throwing a bunch of band tension on there. We may not be throwing the chains and tell them like, you're going to throw that bar through to the freaking moon, but I'll still have them do 10 sets of 3 reps because it gives them 10 opportunities to set up perfectly. Okay. And it gives me as a coach 10 opportunities to watch them set up and say, hey, that one, we got some work to do. Let's keep your back a little bit tighter. Let's tuck the elbows in just a little bit. And then let's see your next set. Okay. Now let's make sure your feet aren't moving around when you press. Okay. And it gives me more opportunities as a coach to do my job, which is to make sure that they're lifting effectively. So I think if someone's not strong enough, there's still a lot of benefit to get from dynamic effort work. The benefit may not only come from getting faster. And then talking about speed, yeah, some of the percentages say, okay, you're going to take, 50% of your bench press and add 30% of band tension on there or 30% of chain. And you can do that for beginner athletes. And that's great. And that's awesome. But you could also just have them use 70% of straight weight and talk to them about compensatory acceleration, which is just trying to move the bar as fast as possible without any accommodating resistance. I also think that's really beneficial. And then kind of like the last point here, if you're training in a group setting, at least, and this is what I found with the guys that I work with in person, we have an AM crew. We train at 4:30 in the morning. Yeah. None of those guys have been lifting as long as I have, but they get really fired up when I pull out some bands and chains. And for camaraderie and boosting morale, that's just fun. And they get excited about it. And there's definitely some benefit to that too.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, I guess where I'm coming from with is, do you, okay, I still didn't really get to, the answer of like what I was going to, do you think it'd be beneficial for me to keep doing it? Because like I said, my weights right now are really lower. They're just like, I'm using nothing really impressive at all.
Yeah, I would say Well, let me ask you this. What is your biggest goal that you're hoping to achieve from the dynamic effort work? To get faster, or to just get in some extra volume to get more explosive? What would be the biggest
I
goal?
guess it would be like the volume. I don't really think I mean, like my
Okay.
jiu-jitsu game is not fast. I'm more of a, uh, pressure pass smash, type of grappler probably because of my age. I don't do a lot of dynamic, fast movements, like a lot of the younger guys do. So I don't really see. I guess that's part of my thing too. Is like for my personal use of dynamic effort, I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's cool. It's great for what it is. But I'm
Yeah.
just saying for my own personal use, I don't know if I see a lot of benefit in doing it because I don't really use those type. I don't generate that type of explosiveness a lot of times. I mean, I guess I do sometimes. If you're going for a scramble and you're trying to get, top position, you'll do it then out of necessity.
Yeah.
But my primary game is not an explosive fast game.
Gotcha.
So that's why I'm sort of like, is it really something I should really concentrate on, or should I put more effort toward, getting jacked and tan basically, and
Yeah.
more armor and trying to preserve more muscle mass and just being stronger.
Yeah. If that's the case, Craig, I would encourage you to just look at some other forms of dynamic effort work that aren't just, we've been talking about the bench press. I think that's the easiest example, but look at some other forms of dynamic effort work for the upper body, and then using that time that you would spend on the bench, just using that for jack and tan work. So that could be medicine ball throws, medicine ball slams, plyometric push-ups, as long as you're kind of greasing the groove a little bit and including that in your training so that your body's capable of receiving force really fast and your tendons and ligaments are durable enough to handle that. As long as you scratch that itch a little bit, I think there's nothing wrong with, moving on to some other stuff. J.M. Blakely has talked a lot about, he was one of the best benchers that ever came out of Westside Barbell. And he's been a little controversial in his stance on dynamic effort work. He thinks it's, it's not as important as a lot of people think. I mean, I think in his case, he's a unique one because he was so explosive. So how much more explosive is he going to get? If you watch some of his max effort lifts and then you look at the sub maximal stuff he's going to do, it's still super explosive. But I think from a sports perspective, that's perfect. Like if you have a slower game, maybe you don't need 10, 15, 20 sets of dynamic effort work, but including something in there, like some plyometric push-ups or some medicine ball passes, just to know that your tendons aren't going to rip off the bone. And if you're put in a situation that requires you to absorb force really fast and then exert it equally as fast. So yeah, I say play around with it, man. And then as always, keep me updated on that. I'm definitely interested to hear with how you mix things up.
Well, I like the idea of doing like you were saying, like the plyometric push-up, like doing that with a band or something that, maybe playing around with those kind of ideas. I might try those. I'll let you know how it goes. I mean, I've done, like I said, I've recently done a lot of, or some dynamic effort benching with bands and so forth. I don't have a lot of chain weight. So if I do accommodated resistance, it's usually bands.
Gotcha.
But I'd like to get some more chains, but they're just hard to find. But I'll play with that and I'll let you know how it goes.
Awesome.
But I do remember J.M. Blakely saying that. I remember he said that on a table talk with Tate. Yeah, about that. I think it's probably good. And I heard some other people talking about other powerlifters in the past. That's why I brought it up too, where they were like, well, if you're not really strong, is there a lot of benefits? So that's why I wanted to ask you the question.
Yeah. And from their perspective, like I agree with that. Like, do you need a ton of band tension if you're not that strong? Probably not. But I think sometimes people, I see this a lot of online and stuff. They think dynamic effort work means bands and chains. When it doesn't always mean that. You could get a lot of benefit of doing dynamic effort work with straight weight. Jesse Burdick is actually, he's someone I've worked with in the past through connections with Mark Bell and stuff. He's an excellent powerlifting coach. And he's talked a lot about that. It says like, look, for his baseball athletes and some other athletes, you don't need a ton of bands and chains. Just get them 10 sets where they learn how to set up correctly and just push the bar as fast as you freaking can with perfect form and then move on and just take it as it is.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Well, that goes into another thing I was talking about, and I was thinking about it while you were describing the dynamic effort, and I was thinking about how I described what my game is like, and that goes into another type of strength that I've been thinking about experimenting with, which is isometric strength.
Yeah.
I heard Gordon Ryan was saying that too, that part of his training is isometric based because he feels his game is an isometric kind of game too. So have you ever done any isometric work? Do you have an opinion on it?
Yeah, isometric work is gosh, it's freaking awesome. I've been doing some form of isometric work since I think like since I was in high school. And there's a lot of different variations of isometric work. You look at like isometrics in the squat. You could do pause squats, which is awesome. You could do squats where you lower yourself down and stop at a certain point and then go down all the way to the hole and then come back up and stop, kind of like you're ratcheting, you know, or like a machine kind of clicking your way down the movement, which is great. And you could use isometrics in a lot of different ways, which I think are beneficial for a lot of grapplers. Yes, grappling does include a ton of isometric strength. So it's important that athletes add a little bit of at least a little bit of isometric specific training into their training programs. But isometrics are also great for viewing position. You look at isometrics in the squat, forcing someone to stop in the squat at the bottom. And then as a coach, being able to look at like, that looks like they're overcompensating on that side a little bit. That position doesn't look very strong. So that's one benefit that I like to use isometric strength for, is just looking and being able to see my athletes move and being able to look at certain things. But then also getting uncomfortable in your weakest position is going to be huge. And a lot of times in jiu-jitsu, we get put in really bad positions a lot. You know, that's kind of part of the sport. You should want to be put in bad positions occasionally so you can learn to get better. Learning how to stabilize and stay tight in bad positions to protect yourself is very important. You can't always explode out of everything like you'd explode out of the bottom of a squat if your bottom position in the squat is actually dog trash. You know, you got to learn how to be comfortable at the bottom, make sure that bottom position, which feels like the worst position ever, make sure that position's solid. And that also applies to jiu-jitsu. When it comes to from like a transfer of isometrics, from a physiological transfer of using isometrics in the gym and then how isometrics are used in jiu-jitsu, I think some awesome things that jiu-jitsu athletes, if they're skilled enough in the gym to actually get some benefit from this, some things that they could benefit from would be overcoming isometrics. So pushing or pulling into immovable objects. An example could be doing a chest supported row into a set of pins. The bar is not going to move. You can't, if it does move, then that's not really the exercise, but you want to pull or push into something that is immovable so that you could ramp up the intensity of the contraction and the recruitment of all the muscle fibers in your nervous system that you're able to get in a way and hold that position. You think about, like you put someone in a rear naked choke, right? It's not just one like hammer curl on one side and tricep extension on the other side where it says, boom, one quick contraction and then they're out. You usually have to squeeze that position, and you can't even just stop at squeezing. You have to continue crushing and squeezing that position all the way through to get the tap or adjust and then get back to that. So doing things like bent over rows or chest supported rows into pins, floor presses against pins. You could do deadlifts against pins. Those are really interesting. Those could really beat you up if you aren't doing them the right way. You can get really fatigued using those. But using overcoming isometrics into immovable objects can be great for grapplers. There's a time and place for that. And I think someone needs to be physically fit enough to be able to handle that, because if you're not, you do run the risk of banging up your joints a little bit if you're slamming these bars into the pins and things. But kind of on the opposite end, isometrics are also great for recovery. I guess I misspoke. They're not great for recovery, like recovery from training, but recovering from an injury or rehabbing an injury. Because when you're doing isometrics against pins or against immovable objects, the strength actually transfers in 5 to 15 degrees of range of motion above and below where you're pressing to. So say I'm doing an overhead press, my elbows at 90 degrees, I'm pressing into an immovable object, elbows at 90 degrees. I'm going to get a transfer of strength that's 5 to 15 degrees, a little bit above and a little bit below. So say my shoulder's messed up. I can't do a shoulder press where I'm starting all the way down with the dumbbells resting or the barbell resting on my collarbones that are in that front rack position. I can get out of that range of motion of pain, press or pull against an immovable object and still be able to get some strength gains 5 to 15 degrees above and below that range of motion. Depending on what study you look at, I believe it's 5 to 10 degrees. Other studies say 10 to 15 degrees, but you do get a little bit of strength transfer above and below that range of motion. So if you're able to do those overcoming isometrics for your injured body part, that allows you to stay out of pain, assuming that your injury is healed enough to be even able to withstand that. That's an easy way for you to still get stronger and still make progress without re-aggravating that injury.
Okay. And if you were going to use isometrics, how would you incorporate this into the routine? Would you do those in place of like dynamic effort, or?
I would do those. It depends. If it's specifically for strength training and not working around an injury, then I would use them for max effort work.
Okay.
So I've done this a couple different ways. And it really depends on where the athlete is in their season. If an athlete is in their off season, they could do a max effort exercise, like some sort of max effort deadlift, then transition into deadlifts against pins for a few sets as their secondary exercise. If an athlete is getting ready for competition, we actually just did this a couple of weeks ago with some of the guys from the AM crew that competed yesterday. We incorporate the overcoming isometrics as part of their peaking cycle. They're going to recruit a lot of their nervous system. They're going to be able to work at a really, really, really high intensity without causing a lot of muscle damage, which is one of the best benefits, because we're still able to pull a max effort deadlift without getting their hamstrings, their glutes, their low back feeling all sorts of wrecked because they went really heavy on deadlift. So if it's in their off season, you could use it as a secondary exercise. If it's in season, I would hold off on using that until a couple weeks before, like 3 weeks out or 2 weeks out, or maybe like 5 days out, depending on the athlete and if they need it or not. But using it close to a competition as a method of peaking, getting their nervous system, getting their body ready to perform maximally in competition. And then if I were to use it for recovery or working around an injury, I would change the time parameters on how long I'm pressing or pulling into pins based off of whether it's a max effort day or a dynamic effort day. So I had one athlete that got injured, just freak takedown, and ended up messing up his AC joint. So what we did for him was, on the max effort days, like, you're going buck wild, bro. You're pushing that bar into those pins so freaking hard, like push as hard as you can until you feel like you're going to pop a blood vessel, and then pull off on the last second. We did that for max effort day. And then on what would be scheduled as dynamic effort day, I would let them know, like, hey, you're just going to do 10 sets of 5 seconds, take as much rest as you need between each one. You don't need to push like your life depends on it, but I want you to work up to like a solid strain pressing into those pins, but make sure you stay out of pain. Nothing should hurt for today. We want to get a nice, good volume of work, staying out of pain. And then you're going to move on to your other rehab exercises after that.
Nice. Okay. Awesome. So you mentioned the slingshot earlier today, and I wanted to bounce something off you. I was thinking about how I could use supportive, or here's a better way to say it. What's your opinion of using supportive equipment for the BJJ athlete to lift? Because what I'm saying is, like, obviously you can lift more when you wear a belt.
Sure.
You lift more if you use a slingshot. You can lift more if you use knee sleeves. Have you ever thought of, or have you ever used the idea of maybe going like really raw the first week, then throwing a belt on the second week, then the third week putting a belt and knee wraps on, just sort of another way to like increase the intensity per se on a particular exercise?
Yeah, I have. And my perspective on this has changed a lot over the years. Before, and when I was doing CrossFit, everything was as fast as possible. So if the knee sleeves are going to give me more bounce out of the hole on squats, hook me up with those knee sleeves, bro. Like, I'm trying to get fast. And then it switched to like, okay, really, how strong am I if I have to wear these knee sleeves or a belt? So then I just raw dogged everything. And I think there's benefit to both perspectives, and there's some fallacies to both perspectives. And so specifically talking about grappling athletes, in my perspective, I think you should do whatever you need to stay out of pain with a reasonable amount of caution in there. If your back is absolutely killing you and the only way you're able to squat is if you throw on a belt, I don't think that you should be wearing a belt. You should probably figure out how to get rid of your back pain first. And then as you start easing into things, throw the belt on when you feel like you need it. Same thing with like knee sleeves. If your knees are killing you and the only time you can squat is if you have your knee sleeves on, I don't really feel like wearing some super thick powerlifting style knee sleeves when I do jujitsu.
Right.
So I'd rather figure out a way to be able to squat without knee sleeves and sprinkle them in when need be.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a time and place for them. I think some gear is actually going to help you lift more weight and increase the intensity of your training sessions, which that's really important to recognize that you need to be strategic with when you do that. If you use a belt so well that you're getting 50 or 60 pounds out of a lift when you're using your belt, you need to be very careful with when you add your move, with when you decide to throw on a belt. For me, I was doing a lot of deadlifts with a belt, end of 2020. So I was going as heavy as I could. The goal was to deadlift 500 pounds. Didn't quite make it. But everything I was doing, all my top sets were with the belt. And then in January, I wasn't as focused on getting stronger in my deadlift, but I still wanted to deadlift pretty heavy. And I'm pretty sure like this whole year, I don't think I've put on a belt for any deadlift or squat sessions. And my deadlift is just right back up to where it was when I wore the belt. So it's a great test. It's a great improvement of strength. And I'm not so sure if the belt would actually do as much anymore. So I don't really feel the need to wear a belt unless like my lower back is, acting up a little bit. But even still, I have to recognize like, okay, am I doing this just to lift weight, or am I doing this to improve in jujitsu? Do I need to take care of my lower back first, or do I need to just get this, figure out a way to lift this amount of weight? And because I'm not, competing in powerlifting or anything, everything's focused on jujitsu performance. Usually I'll just take care of my lower back, cut it, 40 to 50 pounds lighter than what I would have liked to hit for the day, and move on. So some equipment is going to help you lift a ton more weight, and it's going to make your training sessions a lot more intense. And the recovery from those training sessions is going to take a lot longer. Equipment like wrist wraps, equipment like certain elbow sleeves, equipment like, we can get to straps in a little bit, my opinions on straps, but wrist wraps, certain types of elbow sleeves, things like that. If it feels better to not, if your wrist hurt when you bench and you need some wrist wraps, or your wrist feel a little bit more stable, go for it. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Same thing with elbow sleeves. If you just did a bunch of Komura and armbar drills at jujitsu and your elbows are killing you when you're doing your floor press, or even if you're doing some other accessory work, then throw on a pair of elbow sleeves, man. There's nothing wrong with that. Straps, I think, because grip strength is such a huge component of grappling sports, I think you should avoid to use straps as much as possible. Though I've used straps, I think once like in the last 3 years, and that's because I cut my fingers open and I couldn't grab a barbell, so I put on some straps. But yeah, I think straps, they're great for strength athletes, but for jiu-jitsu athletes, I think you should do the best you can without them. And now the slingshot is freaking awesome. It's my mentor, Mark Bell, invented it. It's a supportive upper body bench press device that allows you to bench heavy with no pain. And that was kind of the first intended use of the slingshot, is like, okay, this is what Mark had told me. He said, I tore my pec 3 times and I just want to be able to bench press again. So I need something that's going to help me a little bit at the bottom, but allow my shoulders and triceps to fully take over at the top, because I'm strong in that position. So that was great. It's a great way to work around pain, which is awesome. But the slingshot also had a lot of added benefits of overloading the bench press movement. So if you use it the right way and safely, you're actually able to bench press 10, sometimes 15% more than you ever could if you were doing it raw. And again, we need to be really careful with when we implement using a slingshot in our grappling training, because it's going to be a lot more weight, which is awesome in the right time and place, but it's also going to take a lot longer for you to recover from. And it's going to, you do run the risk of it, of doing too much too fast. If you do everything with the slingshot, the bottom position off your chest, it's going to get a little bit stronger, but not as strong as if you spend some time just doing everything raw dogged for a little bit, not using the slingshot, really working on figuring out the mobility to get the bar down to your chest in a comfortable position and being able to press from there. So everything, one of the greatest, safest answers of all time, right, Craig, is it depends. So with all this stuff, it depends. But if you're a jiu-jitsu athlete or a wrestling athlete that's looking or watching this or listening to this, before you start incorporating a bunch of gear, ask yourself, am I using this gear to stay out of pain? If the answer is yes, awesome. Then ask yourself, okay, well, how can I start getting rid of the pain first, and then use this gear as a little bit of a supplement and less of a crutch? And then if you're an athlete listening or watching this and you're looking to get stronger and overload your training, then that's a much deeper conversation, one that we'll probably have to save for another episode. But talking about, specifically when to overload training, how you're going to add that into an athlete's peaking cycle, when you could use that at the end of a strength phase, all that good stuff.
That's where I'm at with it. It's like, I don't use it for pain or whatever. I just use it as like, it's a way to overload. I've got the original slingshot, and I have a push-up slingshot.
Okay.
I have some, what are the knee sleeves I have? I have the gangsta knee sleeves.
Oh, okay.
Those are pretty thick. Those are pretty thick. I got to put those on. Those
are nuts, bro. When those first came out and we were trying them at the gym, it was, there was some good times. People were gangstering out literally on those.
Those are nice. Those are nice. I mean, I got, back in the day, it was always knee wraps, and we'd always put knee wraps on. And I remember the first time I put a knee wrap when I was powerlifting in my early 40s, the first time one of the guys put knee wraps on me for real, the way they're supposed to be done, I was like, oh shit, they're freaking tight. Yeah. It was, I couldn't wait to get the rep done and get the things off me. It was way different. And all the years before that, when I did it myself, it was like a moderate wrap is what I figured out. I thought it was tight. It wasn't tight at all.
We had Andrei Milanichev come out to the gym a couple months ago. And as a joke, we were all like going nose goes to see who doesn't get their knees wrapped by Andre, because that dude is so big and so strong. If you're getting your knees wrapped by Andre, like you're gonna die probably.
It's a tourniquet.
Yeah.
So that was a good explanation, though. When we will have to do another episode, we get more into that, how to use that at the end of a cycle and to push it farther. And we talked about isometric strength. And we talked about how you would program it for the average person, probably like 2 or 3 days a week, probably 3 days a week.
Just a quick point on that, Craig. That's probably the most common question I get is like, how many days should I lift for wrestling or jiu-jitsu? And yes, pretty commonly for a lot of my athletes, it's somewhere between 2 to 3, sometimes 4 days a week. But the biggest thing for anyone listening to this that may be thinking of that question is, how many days should I lift for jiu-jitsu? In my opinion, you should lift as often as you can, as long as it doesn't negatively impact your jiu-jitsu training. Now, that's going to look like a lot of different variations. You could do like a mini workout 7 days a week. Awesome. If it's negatively impacting your jiu-jitsu training because you don't have time to do that, okay, well, there's your answer. Maybe condense it down to 3, maybe 4 days a week. Still be careful with how hard you're going on those lifting days, but just lift as much as you can, as long as it doesn't negatively impact your jiu-jitsu performance or other aspects of your life. And that's how you can figure it out.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, like if anybody's listening is around my age, is I have found usually 2 days a week. If you're really training jiu-jitsu hard, like it depends on how many days you're rolling. If you're rolling, like I said, for the most time I've rolled 5 days a week. So if you're rolling 5 days a week and you're in your late 40s, in your early 50s, or even your early 40s, whatever, your 40s period, your middle age, rolling 5 days a week, you're probably going to get 1 or 2 really good weightlifting sessions in a week if you're not dogging it in the gym. And I mean, if you're just going in and drilling jiu-jitsu and you're not really rolling and you're going into lift weights and you're sort of half-assing it, you can probably do more often. But or if you're using more of a, well, I won't even say that. No, you're just half-assing it. I mean, even if you're going to use like a bodybuilding protocol, that's still a lot of intensity. We both say we've both done bodybuilding, and real bodybuilding is painful and it's very intense.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So you're going to have to make a decision. You can't serve 2 masters. So that makes sense to me. And that's my input on that. And I feel like after, lifting weights almost all my life and all this stuff, I have a little bit of an opinion on that. And I would say in my personal experience, like 2 days max, maybe a third day if it's like you said, like it's just like doing accessories or maybe some kettlebell work and things like that. Nothing that's too taxing. Yeah, you could do that. But like 2 heavy, hard days, that's probably all you're going to get. unless you're using super supplements or,
Sure. Yeah.
stuff like that, which I don't do. And I'm not judging anybody.
Sure.
Whatever, you get TRT, you do whatever you want to do. But, I'm actually at the point where I'm considering it, like talking to a doctor and like getting my T levels checked and maybe doing TRT if I can, if it's necessary, if I'm at that level.
Yeah.
I feel like I've tried to squeeze all the blood out of that turnip as far as I could, as long as I could in my life, to not do anything like that. But I'm starting to feel a little bit like it's probably starting to happen. So we'll see. How do you, this is the other thing I found, like my personal experience. It's like conditioning, neck, grip, and core work, flexibility, mobility. People have all these things that they recommend, and they're all great things. And I want to do them. They're beneficial. But then there's also the reality of time and all that. Now, you made a very good statement in a video I watched the other day by you. You said, if you can't find 10 minutes a day to do this mobility work, then you probably really don't want to feel better.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
I listened to that and I shut up and I just did it. And I'll do it again today and I'll do it again tomorrow.
Yes, sir.
So, but what about conditioning and like neck grip and core? Do you do specific neck grip and core work, or do you sort of incorporate that into, like, mix it into the type of work you do normally in the gym?
Both, actually. So sometimes I will incorporate neck work. For me personally, I do incorporate a decent amount of extra neck work just because my neck has been messed up for a long time. And so to feel good, I got to make sure that I'm making neck work just a daily practice. So that's for me personally. Mm-hmm. For all of my other athletes, it can look like that, where it's like, dude, you got to be doing some daily neck work or else this problem's just going to get worse. For other athletes, their neck feels fine, and we just do a little bit of maintenance stuff that's mixed into the training sessions. So for neck work, I'm a big fan of just using neck exercises as active rest when you're working with groups or just training by yourself. I freaking despise when people are on their phone in the gym. It makes me so freaking heated. And to me, it's just disrespectful,
right,
to be in the gym. So if you're bored and you're getting kind of antsy because you don't want to rest for like the full 90 seconds or 2 minutes, whatever's prescribed in your training program, that's fine. Just throw in some neck work. Unless you're doing like some really heavy bench presses, I don't think really there's any exercise that's going to get deteriorated because you're getting a little bit of a neck pump. So just mix in some neck work. It could be some body weight neck work. You're doing some, you lay on your back, do some side to side, ears to shoulder stuff. You can do some neck crunches. You can also incorporate some banded neck rotations, which I think is one of my favorite exercises of all time. I have one of those iron neck harnesses at home, which is great. Not everyone has access to one of those, and not everyone's always able to bring that, lug it to the gym with them and hook it up at their commercial gym. So just put in a band on the squat rack or something, throw it in and around your head, looking side to side, going ears to shoulders, going forwards, backwards, get left and right side. That's an easy way for you to mix in neck work. That's not going to add too much to your workout if you're just using it as active recovery. Grip training, I think a lot of times it's going to come from lifting heavy and not using straps. The way I structure warm-ups for my athletes is where I mix in, that'd probably be like the most specific grip work. So when we do an upper body day, our warm-ups are very similar to Matt Wenning's method of warming up, where we pick 3 to 4 different exercises that are going to engage and warm up and get lots of blood flow through the major muscles and joints that we're going to be working for that specific movement. So for floor press, we're working up to a really heavy floor press. We're going to do something for our triceps. We're going to do something for our upper back and our rear delts. We're going to do something for our chest a little bit. So that could be, we're going to do dumbbell bench press. We're going to do banded tricep push downs. We're going to do cable face pulls or banded face pulls. And then we're going to do lat pull downs or seated rows. On the pulling movements, I'll go ahead and throw on a pair of fat grips or use one of the big fat handled attachments. That's a real easy way to get their forearms lit up just a little bit to get that extra grip work in. And then outside of that, I think it just comes from learning how to squeeze and hold barbells and dumbbells correctly. A lot of times we see people in the gym, they hold bars in like the edges of their fingers, which there's a time and place to do specific finger training if you're, doing a lot of Ghee Jiujitsu. But I think for the most part, you just got to learn how to properly hold barbells in place and squeeze tightly. A big cue that I give a lot of my athletes when they're doing floor press or bench press is to squeeze the hell out of the bar. Because a lot of times people just like let it sit on their hands. They're not actually squeezing it.
Right.
And when you're actively squeezing dumbbells and actively squeezing barbells through a lot of these exercises, you do get a lot of added benefit as far as grip work is concerned. And then conditioning, what's great about jiu-jitsu and wrestling is that there's a lot of conditioning mixed in jiu-jitsu and wrestling. So yes, there maybe is a time and place to do some added conditioning, but at that point, how long are you spending in the gym? If anything over 60 or 90 minutes, like you're just in there, in my opinion, for way too long. Your what's the official term? Your serum testosterone drops after about 45, 60 minutes in a training session already. So because of that, how much effort and how much intensity are you going to actually be able to push when you're getting past that 90-minute mark? At that point, you're still getting a little bit of benefit, but you might as well just save that for another day or just try to get a little bit better conditioning at jiu-jitsu. So a lot of times, and I have a video on YouTube about this too, on how you can incorporate some of these drills to improve your conditioning. I've said it before, and not, I mean, now that we're having a long form conversation, I can explain more of why I'm not a huge fan of running, but it does make for a fun social media clip, is just to say, okay, perfect. We're on the same page. I freaking hate running too. You can't put a tiger in front of me. Maybe you can get me
exactly.
Outside of that, I'm driving, walking, or doing jiu-jitsu. So that's, no running for me. But the biggest thing is because running just doesn't replicate what it's like to actually be in a wrestling match or do jiu-jitsu. It's just not the same. It's great for building up conditioning. It's awesome. Some of the best conditioned people in the world are runners, but they don't do jiu-jitsu, and jiu-jitsu athletes really shouldn't be running in a match. Same with wrestlers. So there's a way that you can structure your grappling training and your mat time so that you can improve your conditioning. And I think a lot of that comes from specific situational sparring. If you're only doing 6-minute rounds or 10-minute rounds at jiu-jitsu, you're going to consistently fall into the same lulls of what's comfortable for you. So if you like to play spider lasso guard, as soon as that roll starts, you're going to find a way to get back to spider lasso guard where you're comfortable. If you get out of an uncomfortable position, you're going to try to hang out in the most comfortable spot of that uncomfortable position as long as you can. There's not a lot of active movement. And especially once you start training at the same place with the same training partners for a while, you end up falling into each other's games. There's a lot of stalemates. There's a lot of downtime within that match. Yeah, you may get some hard rounds in there too, but that's kind of the way, that's kind of just the natural progression of being training partners and being in a grappling sport. So one thing we did, and I did this with the wrestling team that I coached, my head coach taught me this method, and now I'm using it with all my grappling athletes, is finding ways to specifically drill that are going to ramp up the intensity of that roll. So we use the example of a 10-minute round. If in that 10-minute round, you're getting in 10 minutes of grappling work, but only 90 seconds of that are actually high intensity, well, now you have 90 seconds worth of endurance to work with over the course of a 10-minute match. If you're a competitor, good luck counting on that 90 seconds to win you any gold medals. So what we'll do is we'll break that up into segments. So we'll have certain training days where it's like, hey, we're just doing 10-minute rounds, treating it like competition, play into your game. If you get tired, find spots to rest. That's the goal. We're simulating competition. Then we'll have other training days where it's all positional stuff and it's just focused on building grappling specific conditioning. So that could look like you're going to start, one person's going to start in side control, the other person's going to start in bottom side control. The goal for the bottom man is in 60 seconds to get back to a guard position. You have to get back to a guard position. If you don't, you lose the match. There aren't any tournaments that are structured that way, but let's imagine that they are. So in 60 seconds, you got to hurry up and start hauling ass so that you can get back to some sort of guard position, whatever guard position you want, but get back to some sort of guard position in 60 seconds. That is going to increase the demand, increase the urgency, increase the intensity of that training session. That's 60 seconds. So that's 1 minute. You hit that for 10 rounds and then you switch. Not only did you get 10 rounds, 10 minutes of work in, of grappling work in, you got 10 minutes of a position that you normally wouldn't find yourself in for a full 10 minutes if you just did one round. Okay, maybe if you're rolling with a really good black belt, you'll be stuck in side control for 10 minutes, but probably not. And then the third, and I think the most important benefit, is you got 10 minutes of high intensity work. You're going to structure rest periods between, that way you can maintain the level of intensity. But that's a really easy way for you to increase your conditioning, because you are working at that higher intensity that's required for you to make conditioning gains. You're getting more exposure to uncomfortable positions or positions that you're weak in. And then you're also able to not run, and you can just do jujitsu and wrestling. So that's my take on conditioning.
No, that's excellent. Yeah, because I'm the same way. I think that we're built to only run away from danger.
Yeah.
Other than that, forget it. I hate to run. It's painful and it feels like crap.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Oh God. Okay, Josh, that's something we really have in common. So we can build a relationship on that opinion.
Sounds good, man. Sounds good.
So what about diet? What do you feel about diet? What's your niche?
Yeah. So diet, I'm pretty neutral on a lot of diet stuff, because I think I think there are diets that'll work really well for a lot of people, but people's relationship with food, at least in the 21st century and at least in modern society, gets really tricky. In my opinion, I view food as only fuel, and I don't care what it tastes like. If it tastes great, then that's like an added benefit, but I'm only eating to perform. That's me personally. And it's taken me a while to recognize that not everyone else views it that way. So I think for diet, the most simplest way that I start all my athletes out with first, as far as like following a diet, is say, look, dude, eat what has a mom or comes from the ground. Let's stick with that. Just if you could go a whole day eating what has a mom and comes from the ground, we'll consider that an A+ for you. Let's not worry about counting macros right away. Let's not worry about like, well, should I be high carb and low fat or high fat and low carb? Like, what about keto? What about fasting? What about paleo and stuff? I've done all those diets. I've done intermittent fasting. I've done versions of the ketogenic diet. I haven't done carnivore, like giving it a fair shot, like for a full month, but yeah.
I thought for sure you would have tried carnivore.
Oh, no way, man. Like
Mark is dog. Mark is so into that, or he was for a while.
He is. And the biggest thing is that like I just love rice too much. Like I feel really good incorporating carbohydrates in there. And I think with jujitsu and lifting, the goals that I had, the carnivore diet wasn't going to be the best fit for that. So maybe when I'm a little bit older and I'm not pushing the pace as hard in jujitsu, or I have some downtime, I'm interested in it for sure. And I do think it has value, but as far as me incorporating it into my lifestyle, I don't think it's going to help me reach the goals that I have. So, but I've tried a lot of different diets. I've tried a lot of different things, and they've all had varying amounts of success. But the thing that people need to recognize with diet is that so much of diet comes down to discipline, the level of discipline that you have. And one of the things I'm really, really big on is daily discipline. And the two keys of daily discipline are preparation and consistency. If you can, so specifically when it comes to diet, find a diet that you can be consistent with and that you can constantly stay prepared for. If you're following some diet that requires you to go to the store and get all these crazy ingredients, and you need this special apple cider vinegar, you need to go get this Himalayan salt, that, and you can't keep up with that, it's probably not the right diet for you. Your friend could probably have had like the most best looking 6-pack and the biggest arms you've ever seen. But if you can't keep up with that, then it's not really worth your time to try to maintain that, because it's just not working out. So I start really, really basic, really, really broad, really, really simple for all of my athletes. And then we slowly narrow things on what's going to work with them. So I have some athletes that I work with where they're pretty good with their food already, and they don't need that much guidance. And I just say, hey, like, when I send them their program for the next couple of weeks, I'll let them know like, hey man, we're going to be really pushing the pace here the next couple of weeks. So the rice that you've been adding to your meals a couple times a day, maybe just have like another half cup before you go into your workout, throw a little salt on there, that we are still feeling good. And he's fine. He's good. I don't need to check it on him. Other people, it's a lot more involved in saying, hey, how many grams of protein did you get today? Really got to make sure you're getting the 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, just as a baseline. We'll play around with your carbs and fats after that, but we got to make sure you have enough protein to recover from these training sessions. And so the diet that I follow kind of pulls from all of those things. It took me being really specific, really dialed in, really focused on weighing everything and measuring everything out for a while. That way I could build some habits and build consistency with my nutrition. But now it's very vertical-ish. Stan Efferding, he's one of the greatest strength athletes and resources for strength and conditioning education that I think the world has ever seen. And his vertical diet is very, very, very friendly to me. So there's a lot of protein, decent amount of carbs in there, a lot of fruit. I'm a huge fan of fruit, decent amount of fats. And the diet is based off of just eating foods that you can eat in high quantities that are going to allow you to continue working towards and making progress on the goals that you have, while also not messing up your digestion. And I've had not any serious digestional issues, but doing bodybuilding diets, doing tons of protein shakes. Like we've all had those disaster pants diets before. We got pretty shredded, but the toilet was hurting, that's for sure. So I think for diet, like just to wrap up my answer for this, is just find what works best for you. I think everyone should at least at a bare minimum be adhering to 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. I know there's a lot of other resources out there that say you need a little bit less or say you need a little bit more, but you're pretty safe with just 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. And I think for general health, as long as you're focusing on what has a mom and comes from the ground, you're probably going to be okay from a lot of health markers, and could be a little bit more specific based off of family health history, what your doctor says, blood work, all that stuff.
So do you do like the Monster Mash and the spinach and orange juice shakes and the whole thing?
The spinach and orange juice shakes, no, I
like them actually. I've had them.
Yeah. Okay. I'm still.
I was really digging Stan's stuff during the pandemic. I was just, because I was more of like just in a weightlifting vote. I was like I watched Jiujitsu instructionals the whole time, try to keep my head engaged.
Nice.
Train physically for the whole time. But then I was just really into like lifting weights again. And I was watching Stan Efferding for a long time. And I was trying the vertical diet. The only thing about the vertical diet that I sort of was like, it's a cool diet. There's no problem with it. But it's also, I have a family, and my family doesn't want to eat just beef 3 times a day. So, so it's like, I had to like, even though he's like anti-chicken, he thinks chicken is garbage and, etc. I have to eat other sources of protein because my family already doesn't like the fact that my diet is so limited as far as I don't want to eat spaghetti and what all this other crap that they want to eat. Right.
That's funny that you mentioned that, because my wife is the same way. She was on board with the vertical diet probably for 2 weeks. And then she's like, if you make one more thing of ground beef and rice, like I'm going to freak, because, she is much more culinary adventurous than I am. She makes some great food, but it's much more exciting than ground beef, rice, and chicken stock.
Constantly. Yeah. So I liked it. I mean, I like the idea of like, I'd eat the carrot sticks, and I tried a couple of eggs in the morning, and I had the potatoes.
Nice.
I mean, it's good. It's good food. It's cool.
Yeah.
I like it. I mean, it's something. I mean, I basically, I guess I try to eat as healthy as I can, but I do things like I drink some IPAs. I like IPAs. And I'm like, I'm not a professional athlete, so it's like, I think you have to enjoy life a little bit, as you go through it. But for the most part, that's what I do. I eat proteins. I eat rice for my carbohydrates. So I eat some oatmeal.
Nice.
I eat a lot of vegetables. I eat fruits, and I try to eat like 2 or 3 times a day, and I leave it at that.
Great.
That's interesting though that you brought the vertical diet. I was like, I actually tried that. I liked it. It is. I think it's a good diet. I mean, personally, I liked it. What about supplementation? Do you recommend any kind of supplementation or?
I'm kind of back and forth with supplementation. I think, in my opinion, I think diet should come first. I think if you're asking me, like, I don't mean you specifically, Craig. I think like in general, like I get these questions on Instagram, and people say like, oh, hey, should I take BCAAs? Well, first of all, I have no idea who you are as an athlete. So my answer is probably going to be no, just to be safe. But then also I would not advise that someone be looking to those things if their diet isn't already in check. And for me, I've spent years eating the same way. I've eaten the same foods, and I've been very consistent with my diet since I was in high school. And I've added some supplements in there, like some BCAAs and some creatine and some things like that. And it just didn't give me the boost that I saw that was worth the investment. So those things cost money. I try to budget everything out as best I can. And then looking at the budget and seeing like, oh, I'm spending like, 40, $50 a month on these things. And I'm not really seeing 40 or $50 worth of benefit from it. And my diet's already rock solid. So I might as well just keep eating the same way. I will say vitamins, though, I am pretty big on. So supplementing vitamin D, supplementing vitamin C, supplementing some potassium has been huge. Vitamin K2 has been shown to help with the absorption of vitamin D. So recently I've been adding a little bit of vitamin K2 in there. I'm trying to think of what else. I supplement with magnesium, have some magnesium right before I go to bed. I have some I have this sleepy time tea that I get from the store that my wife and I drink before bed. That helps me sleep. I don't know what herbs are in there that help with that, but that has been like a newer supplement that I've been incorporating the past couple of months that's helped my sleep. So I'm definitely big on vitamins, but some of the traditional supplements like your BCAAs, your creatine, your L-arginine and glutamine and stuff like that. For me personally, I haven't found the benefit that would provide a good enough reason to make that investment.
That's interesting that you say, because we're basically almost identical in that.
Really?
Yeah. And that I take, like, for the last, almost year and a half, 2 years, I take vitamin A, C, magnesium, potassium, zinc, D, fish oil.
Wow.
There's probably a couple others like B12, whatever. There's a couple of different Bs, but I take all that every day, every night before I go to bed, and melatonin before I go to bed.
Nice.
And I have creatine in the cupboard, and I haven't touched it in almost 2 years.
I'm the same way, man.
The reason why I say that, and I had this conversation with somebody else, and there was a study, and I can go back and look at it. It was my interview with Scott Shetler, and I think it was like 2 episodes ago. Scott's really good. He's also a BJJ guy and also a really conjugate based driven trainer.
Is he? Where's he located at? I think Atlanta. I think I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
He looks like me.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Great guy. Awesome dude.
Brother, mother. Yeah. So, but he was saying that he spoke to somebody or looked at a study where this particular individual, who was a nutrition expert, I believe, stated that he saw a decreased effect in creatine of people that ate a lot of red meat, which is me, because you're already getting a lot of really high creatine or amount of creatine from the food you're eating. So when you supplement it, it just sort of goes through your system and you're not going to use it.
That makes complete sense.
Yeah. I had the same experience where I would take creatine and it didn't do anything for me. And then I tried to increase the dosage, and then I just had like bathroom issues and stuff.
Yeah.
So I forget, this is stupid, so I stopped taking it. And I didn't notice any benefit as far as strength or anything like that. I didn't notice any. So when I was watching YouTube videos in your garage and in your house and so forth, I noticed a lot of like superhero and comic book characters.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Batman, 100%, bro. Greatest of all time.
That's the correct answer. Batman.
Yeah, my man.
That's it. Who is your favorite in the movies? Who's your favorite
one? Well, I would say I respect all of them, even George Clooney, just because like he's brought a lot of laughs, like just laughing at how ridiculous that movie was. So there is some benefit to his Batman, but I think just given my generation, it'd have to be Christian Bale. I think having that be the first Batman movie I saw, like it's hard to undo your first time. Right. And so the first time I ever watched a Batman movie was Batman Begins. And I'd been a huge fan of Batman even before then. So seeing that was the favorite live action Batman. Of course, the Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill Batman the animated series, they are just like they're just absolute top tier, the best of all time. And then from a artist and writing perspective, I'd say what Scott Snyder and Jeff Loeb did with the New 52 was amazing. What they took Batman from being so like don't get me wrong, I'm down with him like piecing up these aliens and dodging Darkseid's beams and all that stuff. I'm down with all of that, but they brought it back down to like a really based I don't want to say realistic, because let's be honest, the stuff he does is not realistic,
Right.
but
Right.
compared to what he was doing before,
Reality based. Yeah.
Yes, there we go. I love that. Reality based. They brought him back down to reality based. He was a detective this time, less of a superhero. And yeah, so I'd say those are my favorites. Christian Bale for live action, Kevin Conroy for the animated series, and then Scott Snyder and Jeff Loeb's New 52 run.
Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. Because I actually, I'm an amateur artist. Well, semi-amateur. I do get paid for some of my work.
Okay.
But I really like to draw comic stuff, and Batman's my favorite comic character. So you're probably going to hear from me later on, like, give me an address to send you something, because I'm going to.
Oh yeah.
Some artwork. So.
Oh man, I'd love that. Thank you so much.
Batman for me is like, that's like whatever, I can do that in my sleep. So it's fun for me. So.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, that's really the one that I really always, whenever I took a break from drawing and I started doing it again, I always went back to that character, because it was like, I know how to do this still, for the most part. Get my mojo.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. So that was my favorite. That's always my favorite as well. So I'm always excited when I hear that answer. So people can contact you at Facebook at Joshua Settlage, or you're on Instagram at Joshua Settlage, correct?
They can. I would. I've been having some issues with Facebook, so if someone wants to get connected with me, the fastest way, I'd suggest Instagram. Facebook's been giving me some issues, so Instagram at Joshua Settlage. YouTube channel is Settlage Strength, or just the BJJ Strength Coach. Both of those search terms will be able to pull my stuff up. And then I have a podcast as well called the Daily Discipline Manifesto Podcast. That's on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and Spotify.
Nice. Oh, you know what? And before we go, I wanted to ask you something else. You mentioned in a video that you have a project coming up.
I do. Yeah. So this is super exciting. So we've talked about the mobility stuff before, and you watched some of the mobility videos. And so those videos were originally for the instructional that I launched earlier this year called the Mobility Matrix. Basically, it's the Grappler's Guide to assessing and addressing pain, providing you with the mobilizations and exercises you need to decrease the pain that you're experiencing, while also putting it all together in a way that's going to help you decrease your overall risk of injury in the future. And that was awesome. That was a great experience. And so now took care of the mobility side, and we're transitioning into the strength side. So the Strength Matrix website is going to be dropping in October. And this is going to be the central hub for if you're a wrestler, if you're a jiu-jitsu athlete, whether you're just a hobbyist and you just want to not even like get so strong that you're going to be like smashing everybody, but just get strong enough so that you're not in pain, all the way to I'm competing. I'm trying to be the great best in the world. I'm trying to smash everybody whoever steps in front of me on that competition floor. Regardless of what athlete you are, it's going to provide you with the framework necessary to be able to continue making gains in the gym, while also not taking away from your performance on the mat and actually adding to it. We've all been there. Craig, you and I both understand that there's a lot that goes into creating workouts and creating a training program that's going to allow us to continue getting stronger while not taking away from our jiu-jitsu time. And from a wrestling perspective, being involved on the back end of being a wrestling coach, I saw time and time again, these wrestling coaches, the strength and conditioning perspective in wrestling is so backwards and twisted. Everything needs to be level 10 intensity for, 100 reps, because 100 reps sounds awesome. And like, you don't stop, like just high intensity, everything, which there's a time and place for that. But the old school method of wrestling strength and conditioning has been leading to a lot of athletes getting injured. And the old school method of strength and conditioning for jiu-jitsu has been to, you don't need strength, it's all technique, which leads to a lot of people getting injured and a lot of people losing matches. You can't win matches if you're injured. You can't get better at jiu-jitsu if you're freaking weak. And nobody ever lost a jiu-jitsu match or wrestling match or even got injured because they were too strong. So the Strength Matrix website is going to be dropping in October.
Awesome.
They can follow me on Instagram for more updates on that. And then I have a free, to give them like a sneak peek, I have a free 4-week strength program that your audience can sign up for. If they just go to any YouTube video or they go to my Instagram, the link in the bio, they can just sign up for that. It'll get emailed to them.
Awesome. Well, great. I had a great time talking to you today. I hope you come back and you'll do another episode and we can delve into some of the other topics that we just brushed over. But thanks a lot for coming on. It was
Thanks for having me, Craig. This was great. I'd be more than happy to run this back sometime. This was a real pleasure. Thank you.
Oh, great. Yeah. And maybe, we can work something out in the future, and maybe I'll go up to Sacramento, and we can
Yeah.
get together on a Saturday or something in super training or.
Yeah, for sure. We'll make it happen.
Okay, buddy. All right. Have a great day.
You too, bro. Peace.